right. Welcome to IICS 637, Digital Data and Social Media. We're very happy to have you. Everybody, this is Iman. Iman is a former CTV journalist and now independent journalist. Has their master's degree from Royal Roads and the Master of Arts Professional Communication, where they studied Gen Z news consumption habits. So very exciting to have a conversation about how digital media has influenced the news. Iman, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, can you just give a quick overview, like Cole's Notes version, for the students on your thesis and what you learned?
Sure. So I researched how Gen Z Canadians determine trust and credibility in the news online. And so it sort of separated trust as separate from credibility. And it looked a lot at how we consume news online, how it comes to us through algorithms. I know that you're all learning about incidental news consumption and how we are being fed news even when we don't go look for it. But even as we're scrolling and as we're looking through TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is we're scrolling, how do we decide what it is that we trust? How do we decide what it is we find credible? Is it based on colors? Is it based on language? Is it based on visual presentation? Is it based on your own judgments, your own biases on a topic that you know really, really well? Oh, that can't be true because I was told this by a YouTuber, by a podcaster yesterday, so this can't be true. And so my research really looks at how we make those decisions in really quick, rapid time, and what that tells us about the future of news consumption, what that tells us about the future of like mainstream big box media as well.
Okay, so break it down for us. How do people make those decisions? And then what does it mean for media?
So I know we're talking to a bunch of academics here, so I'll say that like part of it is substantiated and corroborated by academia, by our these markers or these metrics of trust and credibility, the expertise of a person, or their positionality, like where in the world they are situated. People wanted to hear news about LGBTQ issues from LGBTQ people. My research happened shortly after October 7th, and people were really interested in hearing news about what was happening in Gaza from Gazans. Um, so that proximity to a story really, really mattered. And it was so interesting because it twisted this idea of journalistic objectivity on its head, right? We have been told as journalists to be impartial, to separate ourselves from the story. And in fact, for so long, women and people of color have largely been left out of the news and the newsroom on the pretense that we are too close to these stories in order to tell them well, in order to tell them accurately, right? But Gen Z is flipping that notion. They're like, no, 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 we want to hear LGBTQ news from LGBTQ people. We want that proximity, even when it came to weather reports. If you have a Canadian journalist in a Toronto newsroom talking about a hurricane in India, Gen Z, at least my participants, were so quick to, oh, let's go find a source in India to actually hear what's happening on the ground in India. That proximity really, really matters. And, this idea of expertise, the old school journalism, or still how we see it today, expertise is done through um, degrees or positions within a company, a CEO of this or CEO of that. But expertise also came with your knowledge base. Again, to use the example of LGBTQ news from LGBTQ people, the fact that they have lived experience on these issues, a trans journalist will have lived experience on trans issues and can maybe uh, build, contextualize and explain nuances to a news story that another journalist might not be able to, or a parachute journalist might not be able to. Um, and this is, and I mean, I love this because I think a lot of us journalists have always had a difficulty with this notion of journalistic objectivity. Of like, wait a minute, no, 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 my identities, my intersectionality make me a better journalist. I can bridge trust and credibility and relations with communities so much easier than my peers can you know
Yeah.
and so to be able to study this and see that, yeah, no, this is what's happening because you know we're talking about a generation of people that have access to all the images, all the information in the world at their fingertips. Why would this old idea of expertise hold credit for them? Like, why
Yeah.
would this old idea of like, just listen to me, I am the news anchor, why would they have that loyalty to one brand of news or one, company of news over this massive breadth that they are exposed to, that they have access to?
That's a really great point. And so I'm going to ask our students in IICS 637. So anybody who's watching this right now, I want you to put in the chat, is that the same for you? Like, do you prefer the journalistic objectivity of the, Walter Cronkite type, journalist with authority, or do you like your journalist to have skin in the game? So I'm really curious in hearing what everybody has to say. And Iman, I will report back. You have something to say.
I'll even throw in a follow-up question. If you
Okay.
do, if you do like um, the mainstream journalism as we have described it, do you take it as fact, or do you listen to what CBC, CTV, Toronto Star, Globe and Mail has to say? But then you also kind of go out there and Google or on TikTok and you go find a commentary that you want to hear from, because that's also kind of two of the same, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
a
how
good point too.
we distribute our trust across many different platforms now, many different voices.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to get into distributed trust with you in a second, but I want to back us up a bit because you mentioned, yeah, that students are reading this week about incidental news exposure or news finds me, I think, as you put it in your thesis. So can you walk us through what is it and why was it so important for your participants in your study?
Okay, so the idea of incidental news or news finds me has always existed prior to the internet, even the water cooler talk at work, where you would all, come together for a coffee at a bar or a water cooler talk where people would share information, right? It is social media, the internet has really amplified it because, algorithms force feed us information based on what is going to keep us glued to the platform. You know, it's been described as the same psychology of algorithms has been described as like compared to the same psychology of slot machines. They are designed to keep you glued to a product. So, like in the early days of algorithms, Facebook, um, it developed an algorithm that was I don't know, it was colloquially called the grumpy algorithm. It would feed you cat videos when it felt like you were grumpy and you were about to get off social media, right? So what that means is that it will feed you stuff that you already agree with. It will feed you stuff that'll keep you reading, that'll keep you watching, that'll keep you on there. So you've heard the terms of echo chambers or silos of information. This is sort of where algorithms become really, really dangerous because it'll feed you that information, even if it's untrue, even if it's misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. It doesn't care about the quality, caliber, credibility of information. It cares about keeping you glued to the product.
Right.
Um, I don't know if I answered your question. Incidental news consumption. It's now part of every day, all of our days. It's everyone is can fall victim to it. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It can broaden our exposure in some ways for someone, and I think this is in one of your readings, for someone who is not very politically aware, who doesn't take much interest in the news or in current affairs, but has a really big social network. Their algorithm will end up feeding them information that they wouldn't normally go look for. And that could be information that broadens, that diversifies their spectrum of information. But the
Yeah, that
opposite is also true. The opposite is also true, right? It keeps feeding you information that you agree with. So, me as a journalist, I actively go and follow politicians, influencers, that I do not at all agree with. I do not at all agree with, but I actively follow them so that my algorithm can every now and again push that side of the argument, that side of the spectrum into my feed so that I'm aware. But then, then we're tiptoeing into digital literacy and media literacy and that intent to like actively try to go out and diversify your feed is not something we all think about.
right.
Sometimes we think, I think there's this idea of me and even younger than me, Gen Zs, millennials, we can trick the algorithm. Oh no, the algorithm is perfectly suited to me. We're not thinking critically enough about like, is it though? How much are we missing? What we see what we're seeing, but what are we not seeing? It's not a question we
Yeah.
ask ourselves very often.
Yes, that is interesting. And so algorithms are one factor that shapes news consumption. But what we know from the literature is that there are other things too. For example, news consumption went up during COVID because people had a lot of time and they were looking for answers, right? They were scared, they had COVID. They're like, I need to find out about this thing. And so then news consumption went up. So I think that many old school type journalists and news editors think that, if we could just make the right sort of video or the right TikTok or whatever, then consumption will go up. But the literature actually suggests that consumption is very like structurally dependent. It's very dependent on what the other things that are happening in our lives. So you can't just say that there's the right way to present content. Do you think, based on the conversations you had with Gen Z, do you think that that is true for them too? Like, it's very context specific. They're looking up news on things that they feel are most relevant to them at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Time and place and capacity plays a huge role in what it is we consume, right? I conducted my interviews with this group as the protocols were winding down, as the law, I was in Montreal, so like as the lockdown had been lifted, and as this generation had spent a lot of time online, they were experiencing burnout and news fatigue. They had to force themselves to consume news, and they were very interested in putting these blinders on, in trying to find information that they deemed credible, that they deemed trustworthy, that they could palate, right? They didn't want to hear from the haters. They didn't want to hear from the bigots. They didn't want to hear from too much opposing thought because they were inundated with misinformation and malinformation during the pandemic. We all were. Younger generations that weren't in school as much and that were glued to their devices more than the rest of us. I think they experienced a type of burnout that borders on trauma. I think it was really, really heavy for them. There has to be an intention in what you consume, or else, even if you are incidentally exposed to news, you just keep scrolling past it. You don't really ingest it, right? There has
Good
to be a
point.
willingness to stop and read, to stop and listen, to stop and consume. And what it is that we choose to stop and listen to is a make or break deal in our breadth of knowledge, our diversity of knowledge, right? What do we have the capacity for? When you are so inundated with information all the time, what do we have the capacity for?
Right. And so your participants told you that they had this issue with burnout and capacity, but they also told you about this idea of distributed trust,
Mhm.
which is, kind of, I think you described it as a version of triangulation, right? I'm looking for this news somewhere else to make sure that it's true. But that seems to me to be also a capacity drain, right? Like, so how are they balancing this burnout and lack of capacity with the fact that they feel they need to follow up on news stories in multiple places?
They're relying on influencers that can synthesize really well. And that's so hard because what does it mean to synthesize and what does it mean to do it really well? That's such objective. It's so objective. I can think of, maybe there's a citizen journalist out there that a lot of you will know named Rachel Gilmore, who does like in some ways is accept like the way that she moves so quickly. She can
Yeah.
analyze, synthesize information so quickly, but also has a huge bias. Her slant, her lean, her bias is not hidden. It's very apparent. And you take the good with maybe the not so good, right? In a case like that, participants were like, well, at least we know her bias. At least she's clear
Yeah.
about her bias. It doesn't take away from her ability to analyze and synthesize information for us. We know it's coming from this particular lens. It's clear. That has been made clear, and that builds trust. As opposed to like, news anchors and news personalities that have ties to oil and gas development or that are staunch supporters of oil and gas development, but don't make that clear.
Right.
They're like, for now, we are going to place our trust in these citizen journalists and online journalists because that's the capacity we have, and we have lost all trust for the
Mm, yeah.
mainstream's
Yeah, that makes
capacity
sense.
to synthesize for us. During shortly after October 7th and the 22 months that have followed, we have seen some deaths referred to as collateral damage or just, oh, they died, and others referred to as murdered. You know, this how mainstream media has framed war, has framed natural disasters, has or which natural disasters it is chosen to even report on. These are things that Gen Z notices or audiences that are online a lot notice because they see it all. It is there
Right.
in front of them. And then they turn to mainstream media, they see the headlines and they see that, that information isn't there. It makes them a little bit bitter, disenchantized with the news a little bit.
Yes.
And
So
then I mean we haven't even gotten into the sweeping layoffs across Canadian media. How do you stay up with this? You have
yeah.
fewer people in the newsrooms fighting for good stories.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good point. So, for those of you who made it this far in the video, I want you to pop a question in the chat and tell us who do you trust for your news?
Hmm.
Now, I really gravitate to what you said about influencers helping us filter these things because I'm not Gen Z and I use that in my own news practice too. You did your interviews before ChatGPT was really widely used. And so now I wonder if you were to do those interviews today, do you think that people would be using Gen AI to synthesize some of this stuff? What do you think?
Such a good question. I would be curious to know how aware people are of algorithmic biases. I use ChatGPT all the time, but mostly as like little social experiments. I'll write something, I'll do my own research on something, and then I'll just go throw it in there and be like, hey, ChatGPT, what do you think of this? And how it will sanitize my language, you know, how it will neutralize my language and remove triggering words like trigger, like harsh words or big words or accusatory words to like soften it a little bit is is interesting because Chat GPT definitely has a slant. And I mean, look, the research on algorithmic biases go way before Chat GPT ever came out. This stuff has existed, this research has been out there for so long. I just wonder that now it is such a handy tool, an easy tool that is at our fingertips. I know that people use it often, a lot for all of their research needs, whatever it is. I wonder how much they know, how slanted it is, and how biased it is, how whitewashed it is, how patriarchal it is, you
Yeah,
know?
that's a really good point. There's still algorithms behind it. All artificial intelligence is, and I don't even think we should call it that, is a collection of complex algorithms. It's a large language model.
I wonder if any of your students have done these tests,
Well,
to
that's a good
throw
question. We should
something in.
ask
Because
them.
I've read a few of these where somebody is like, give me the top 10 historians in history, and they're all white men. And I'll be like, okay, no, but you only gave me white men. So give me a more diversified list of historians in history, and it'll give you a white men and then a couple non-white men. It's like, oh, but you only gave me when? What men? What about people who aren't men? And
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
really have to do this back and forth with ChatGPT to get like a more accurate or diversified. Yeah. Do people have that patience? Do people have that digital media literacy to do that? Um, yeah, it's curious.
Yeah.
I think there's
And I think
yeah.
we're heading into a bigger problem too. So, in the readings that the students have for this week, they talk about the newsroom. So, people on the ground in newsrooms should be amongst the people who are making decisions about whether to incorporate this technology into the practice of making news. Which, I tend to agree with. You can't just unilaterally top down say that we're going to, take on these tools when you're not the person that is, doing the work of journalism every day. But this article was also written a couple of years ago. And since this time, I think we're looking at even bigger problems. What happens when fewer journalism is being produced by journalists because we're using LLMs to write more news articles? And then the LLMs are going to be trained on other things produced with the LLMs, right? So artificial intelligence is training itself on things produced with artificial intelligence. Does it become garbage all the way down? What do you think that would do to trust?
It's so cool. There are some studies out there that talk about the trust, and some people trust AI a little bit more because they see AI as more impartial,
Right, but you've
and
just
less,
determined that it's not actually. We just think of it that way.
right? Exactly, exactly. So this collective trust sort of is out there for AI and even for a blended human and AI use in journalism. Um, they how newsrooms work is that yeah, you have a bunch of journalists out there, and when you turn on the TV, when you turn on CBC and you watch CBC, yeah, you see like a diverse group of people presenting the news, diverse in age, in gender, in sexuality, presenting the news. But the news desk is a very homogenous group, right? The decision makers at the desk are a very, very homogenous group. They always have been. And whatever policy protocol, whether it's AI or language or something else, it all comes back to that group. That's the group that is going to make these decisions. And so interestingly, in order for the free press to remain the free press, it can't be governed by some streamlined policy. It can't have a policy that all newsrooms in Canada have to abide by, that is governed by the government or anything like that. That would, that wouldn't make us a free press, right? So it is up to every individual newsroom to decide its policy and how it's being implemented, and to who gets implemented in what ways, rules and punishments, whether it's a slap, one person gets a slap on the wrist, one person gets fired. That's all up to newsrooms to determine. And so the reading actually that you guys had kind of gets into this, that it has to have some sort of editorial oversight. Each newsroom has to have an editorial body that agrees on how AI is going to be used. But to get to that point is so complicated, and it's so far that people are just using it, and the editorial desk wouldn't know otherwise. News moves so fast, and the layoffs upon layoffs. I mean, you have journalists filing 3 stories in one day to radio, television, and the web. And it's an insane amount. I mean, like, just without AI, the editorial oversight, the vetting process is questionable. The ethics are already questionable, in my opinion, without AI, that now you throw in AI and newsrooms are not putting out policies on this, right? I think CBC put out one a little while ago, but we haven't really seen an update to that. We're not seeing really clear metrics on how AI is going to be used. How are we as an audience going to know when AI is used? And they don't want that report card. They don't want to be held to that standard. They don't want that accountability. They're already having a hard enough time maintaining this accountability that they've promised us and are unable to do, right? It's tricky. AI can be an incredible tool when it comes to putting together reports on business, on weather, even some sports figures, and that would leave room for your business reporters to do deeper analysis, for your weather reporters or meteorologists to do deeper analysis, right? For your
Not
sports
if we're
reporters,
laying them off.
huh?
Not if
Not if
we're
we're
laying
laying
them
them
off.
off,
Yeah.
right? So if AI is used to get some of that synthesizing and some of that easier reporting that is just numbers out of the way, and creating room for those journalists and experts in a way to do deeper analysis on things, great. But really, is that really where we're going? I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to be too pessimistic,
Yeah.
but like, I
No, it's
don't.
okay. I take the pessimistic angle in this class because I think we tend to only be bombarded with the optimistic side of things. So I think to balance it out, we also need to consider the critical stuff. But that said, I have a
But
question for you.
I'll say this: I put a lot of hope right now in online journalism and citizen journalism and
Love
on like
that.
individual journalism, right? So my fear is more that those people that I've entrusted my like future hope, the future of journalism, lies in your hands, that they are going to be irresponsible with AI. That's what I don't want to see.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
What do you think about the fact that our current minister of AI, which is a new position in the Canadian government, is a former journalist?
I would like to hope that a lot of research and corroboration will go into how AI is implemented. But like, we have seen billions of dollars of investment from Canada into AI. A lot of money is going into investing into AI in Canada. Zero of those dollars are being spent on educating the populace on how to use that AI.
Yeah.
We are not teaching people how to use this technology. Not investing in media literacy, in digital literacy, and in critical thinking is a tool. It is deliberate, right? So it's disappointing that we are putting so much money into AI, but we are not teaching people how to use it responsibly.
I think that's a really important point, and I think it's a good point to leave us on. But before I let you go, I want you to tell us, where do you get your news?
I'm still a regular consumer of mainstream media. I rely mostly on CBC. It infuriates me now, and it's so sad because I grew up on CBC and I used to love it. I still watch it and it infuriates me. Al Jazeera is and BBC are regular international news that I consume, and social media for commentary, for analysis. I take Rachel Gilmore's slant, and I respect her ability to analyze and synthesize. The Rover and Christopher Curtis, again, similar slant, but I trust their journalism and I trust their journalistic skills. And I am, as a journalist myself, I am able to take what they say with a grain of salt, and I don't use them as like my sole source of information. I distribute my trust across as much as possible. I talk to people. I um, I share a lot of memes and links and stuff with friends, and I've developed a culture among my friends that we share a lot of information back and forth with each other. It's a social network that I've built outside of my, digital network.
Yeah. And I think that maybe we could all follow your lead, and it would be a good thing for all of us to diversify our news diets. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And my last thing I'll say to your students is like, don't be afraid to share links with friends and ask them for their opinion. Talk to people about the news that you're consuming, and get other opinions on things.
I love that. Let's talk to people.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.